today there is a major vote and debate in the United Nations. The Cuban government requested a special session of the UN General Assembly to condemn the ongoing threats of aggression from the United States and condemn the tightening of the U.S. blockade on the island, which has been, of course, made way worse with the imposition of the energy blockade on Cuba. The special session was announced last week by Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez, who will be presenting today, depends when you're watching this, at the UN General Assembly here in New York. Rodriguez and other members of the Cuban government have called the energy blockade and the recent measures against the island an act of genocide, collective punishment, and a massive, flagrant, and systematic violation of the human rights of the Cuban people and of international humanitarian law. A recent report from The Nation, which cites a cable obtained by investigative journalist Ken Klippenstein, cites this cable, which is called Engaging UN Member States on July 7th, UN General Assembly, Open Debate on Cuba. And in this cable, it shows essentially how Washington, directed by Marco Rubio, our favorite puppet, has been directing diplomatic personnel and embassies to essentially lobby their host nations to object to the UN vote and debate. So already what's happened is that the UN General Assembly has voted to open the debate. So the first lobby is like, don't allow for the debate to happen, vote against the debate. That has failed. Cuba has successfully achieved that there will be a debate on this. And then the orientation also says that if they're unable to stop the debate, which as of now they've been unable to stop it, the cable outlines an orientation for the host countries that says that if there is a debate, you have to speak and call Cuba corrupt, blame it for the economic problems that it's facing, and make sure to deflect all blame from the U.S. government. And importantly, for the countries that have traditionally supported Cuba, there's a clear warning, and this is a quote. The United States will be listening very closely to the remarks at the debate and discouraging the use of points that might create friction in our bilateral relationship. So are we surprised at the use of blatant blackmail by the U.S. to advance its foreign policy goals? Not really, but it does not make it any less nefarious. So here to talk about the latest in US-Cuba relations and about Breakthrough Media's latest documentary, Cuba After Castro, we are very excited to be joined by Abby Martin, who's a co-director of the film and a journalist with the Empire Files. Thank you so much, Abby, and welcome to the show.
Very honored to be here on the all-female panel.
Heck yeah.
Welcome to the woman. Welcome to the womanosphere. Okay, it's not going to.
We're taking it over. We're taking it back.
Yeah. We're taking it back, baby.
You're not going to make Fletch work, okay?
No.
Precisely.
You'll see.
Graham Plattner's not going to work as much as you want him to work. Oh my God, what a mess. Oh God. Let's pivot away from Cuba and let's just talk about men. I'm just joking. No, just
I mean, men who joined Blackwater. Ooh, okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that behind the paywall. If you're watching this and you want to know what we think about Graham Plattner being in Blackwater in 2018, become a member.
This is why we need a view.
Yeah.
Review
of the left. Actually, yeah.
But let's not let men overshadow the work of woman.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I had to. Okay, but first, Abby, in all seriousness, we did want to talk about the incredible documentary that you directed with BT's Matt Belen. Right now, we're probably at one of the most tense moments in US-Cuba ties, and Cuba is facing a tremendous amount of hardship. So why is this film important in this moment right now?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I mean, we are facing the craziest moment in US-Cuba relations. I would argue just the most dramatic escalation that we've seen in the history of what has happened, which is really extreme to say, considering the Bay of Pigs, considering everything that's happened. But the open, naked threats to destroy a country, to bomb it into oblivion if they don't bow down to the dictates of global capitalism and US empire, it's really audacious and insane given where we are in this kind of, so-called rules-based order. I mean, with Gaza collapsing everything, Cuba's been more invisible as this all-out assault escalates. But as we know, I mean, 1,800 Cuban babies have died as a result of the escalation of sanctions just since 2019. So this is mass murder by policy, and it's getting so bad that they're having nationwide blackouts that they're experiencing for days at a time. This is murdering people. So people need to hear from the Cuban president, the person in the crosshairs, the leader that might be black-bagged next. And we need to hear from him instead of these cartoonish mischaracterizations that are fed to us from the corporate media, dictated to us, that tell us a caricature of this person and the entire Cuban revolution. We need to hear from him at length to explain what Cuba is, how it survived for so long, and why it is the way it is. And Americans really, really need to educate themselves now and get solidarity.
Yeah, I mean, it's such powerful work, Abby, and I encourage everybody can go watch it on our Breakthrough News YouTube channel, Cuba After Castro. And you have been touring the country doing screenings of Cuba After Castro, and this is, of course, happening, as we mentioned, at this exact moment where Washington is escalating against Cuba, probably like in the most unprecedented way ever. And you're showing this movie to Americans who've been fed 60 years of propaganda on Cuba, even if it's an audience that, is generally sympathetic to Cuba. I'm just curious, in the kind of conversations that you're having afterwards, like what's breaking through? What reactions are you getting from these audiences? And are you noticing any walls that you're still kind of hitting in conversations about Cuba after people watch this film?
Yeah, I mean, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I've had no one sit through the film and actually be able to argue with the premise. I mean, the thing is, I do counter like very hard questions against the president, and I do question, these pillars of propaganda that we hear constantly bemoaned from Western media and the political establishment, that Cuba's a dictatorship, that there's no freedom of press, that they arrest political dissidents. That's literally the three pillars of propaganda that are used to justify this asphyxiating genocidal blockade. And so I do confront the president about those things, unlike Western leaders who don't allow questioning of their policies, who would have everything pre-scripted. The Cuban leader was pretty open and able to explain at length these things. And I want Americans to really understand, and take away with their own opinion if they're satisfied with those answers. But people watching the film have been blown away by the humanity shown by the Cuban leader. I mean, just the humanizing this person, to really get into his shoes and to immerse yourself in these stories, because it really does bring alive the last 60 years of struggle, of resilience, of fighting under the boot of the world's largest military empire, and what they've been able to achieve with a set of collective values that differs vastly from their island neighbor, or from their neighbor, So yeah, I mean, Americans' perspective has been completely shifted and blown away by the film, and I think it's just so crucial because we have collective memory loss. We're like goldfish in a bowl, and so to really watch a film that takes you back to the beginning and brings you up to speed of why things are the way they are, I think is crucial.
Yeah. I mean, one of the scenes that I love the most is when he goes to like a province and attends an open meeting of the neighborhood, and it's being lit, in kind of like a rudimentary way. And he stands there while people in the crowd just like ask him questions. And then you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is like a neighborhood assembly. And then you remember that it's actually the president of a country who's engaging with his people. And it's like mind blowing. Like you can't even imagine that scene taking place in any other country but Cuba. So really incredible, and highly recommend people check it out. It's beautiful, it's moving, and extremely informative. But, as we mentioned at the top today, right now, a very important debate is happening in the United Nations to condemn the tightening of the U.S. blockade on Cuba. And, every single year, the whole world's population has been calling for an end to the blockade, with, of course, the exceptions of Israel, Ukraine, and whatever other U.S. allies, the U.S. is able to pressure into voting against this resolution. And they call every year for an end to the blockade, but it still hasn't happened. Despite the fact that for over 30 years, the whole world has said, let's end the U.S. blockade on Cuba. So why is Cuba still going to the UN, and what is the importance of going to this space?
I think just to get on record the state of emergency that Cuba is experiencing right now, the fact that they, with a gun to their head, felt like they were forced to open their economy with these new economic measures that is going to vastly increase inequality. I mean, they are at such dire straits and they need to appeal to the world's humanity. They need to appeal to the last, whatever's left out there. I mean, look, I don't think that they have any other choice. But, you know, as we know, based on the world's voting every single year, you know, the world has spoken. The world has spoken several times over that this is a crime against humanity, that this is an egregious crime of collective punishment, to punish 10 million, 11 million people on a peaceful island that has done nothing but try to advance humanity. They are being punished. They're being suffocated. I mean, to not have oil, I just want Americans to really imagine what that translates into. That's not just your refrigerator going down and you know, your food getting spoiled. That's babies dying in the NICU. That's elderly people not able to use ventilators. That means mass murder. This is insanely sadistic and cruel. And the fact that the Western media just talks about this so casually as if it's an inevitability that Cuba is just going to be destroyed. The world needs to step up and stop this madness. Just like Gaza, because this is not the first and it's not the last country that's going to suffer at the hands of the U.S. Just because, and that's the real thing here is that Cuba doesn't have oil, they don't have rich natural resources like Venezuela and Iran. It's just a symbol of defiance. It's a Cold War grudge, and it just reveals the sadistic, cruel nature of U.S. empire.
Yeah, unlike Iran, it's like Cuba doesn't have a Strait of Hormuz it can block as like leverage. It's literally just this tiny little island that is an hour plane ride away from the biggest, most destructive empire in the history of the world that's just completely choking it. It's so horrifying to witness this from such a disgustingly cruel administration. So, you know, I want to also, speaking of a cruel administration, that's also incredibly petty. You know, the Nation broke the news last week that the U.S. has been lobbying countries, and maybe lobbying is not even the right word, it's more like bullying countries, through their embassies around the world at the direction of Marco Rubio, or Narco Rubio, to get them to stifle the debate and the vote, and then, you know, to speak against Cuba in that debate. So what do you make of this directive, and why do you think the U.S. is just so invested in being this unbelievably petty?
Yeah, it's grotesque and insane. I mean, just this whole revival and resurrection of the Monroe Doctrine, the Donroe Doctrine. I mean, just look in the last 2 weeks. You have Colombia fomenting regime change in Colombia to secure pro-Israel, pro-U.S. candidate there. Peru cementing now like the daughter of a dictator, this fascist, like Japanese fascist in Peru. You see Cuba opening the economic reforms. Venezuela's a vassal state. It is insane. Just the shifts that they're seismic because they want to reinstate control. It's frothing at the mouth imperialist fervor. And you have Marco Rubio, who's latching himself onto the chaos presidency, who knows that this is maybe his last chance to pave through regime change. But what will that actually look like? Because you're not going to destroy the Cuban Revolution, just like you're not going to destroy the Bolivarian Revolution with all the communes and the collectives in Venezuela. You have to impose and install some sort of Pinochet-type dictatorial rule where it's actually a military dictatorship, where you're going to have bloodletting and bloodshed. But that's who Marco Rubio is. He's a sadist, and he doesn't care if he mass murders Cubans at a whim. So that's the situation that we're in right now. But it's so petty and so insane, and it just really reveals the nature of this so-called global order where the U.S. blackmails the planet and has a nuclear gun to the head of the world that says, play by our rules or we'll murder you.
I mean, it is exactly that. And, you know, Abby, you this year or last year, I think it was, you also released an incredible film, Earth's Greatest Enemy. This really blows the lid off of what a lot of people don't know, which is the fact that the U.S. military is the biggest contributor to climate change, is the biggest polluter in the entire world. And, you know, an incredible film. How does this connect how does Earth's greatest enemy connect to what's happening in Cuba right now?
Cuba is a case study of Earth's greatest enemy. None of these things are separate from each other. Earth's greatest enemy is a system that imposes this unsustainable fossil fuel infrastructure at the barrel of a gun. The US military is the enforcement mechanism for global capitalism, and Cuba is a consequence of this insatiable thirst to feed the oil dragon, to secure this control and domination over the planet. Cuba has not played by the rules and dictates of the US, and so it's been punished, relentlessly starved, trying to be forced into submission. But guess what? The Cuban people will not go down easily, and they won't go down without a fight. And so Earth's greatest enemy, not only it shows the vast scale and expanse of the US military domination and pollution, ecocidal nature of US imperialism, but also shows the counterweight of the struggles, the fight for survival, the resilience of so many grassroots movements around the world that are putting their jobs, their bodies on the line just for a chance to fight these parasitic billionaires that are robbing our planet. Check it out, earthsgreatestenemy.com. And while you're at it, watch Cuba After Castro. Dose yourself, dose the world. Let's give ourselves a fighting chance.
No, truly. I mean, if you're not following Abby's work yet, you definitely need to. And if I'm not mistaken, Earth's Greatest Enemy is available for rent on most platforms and recently was acquired by Watermelon Pictures, a Palestinian-run and owned distribution company. So that's amazing. You can check out Cuba After Castro on Breakthrough News YouTube. And Abby, I mean, thank you so much. And I feel fired up. I won't say ready to go because...
baby.
Well done.
Let's go. See you guys. Love you. Mwah.